welcome to GCSE Chemistry. After this video, you should know several ways of writing chemical equation. You should also know how to balance chemical equation. Chemical equation is fundamental to chemistry. So, as I said, chemical reaction, it shows a reactant, the substance you start with on the left-hand side, an arrow to show that reactants react completely to form products. There are several ways you can represent chemical equation. You can represent chemical equation using word equation. You can also represent chemical equation using symbol equation. How do we represent using word equation? For example, we can represent hydrogen gas, reaction between hydrogen and oxygen to form water. We can represent that using word equation. So, as I said, reactants, hydrogen and oxygen are called reactants, and the water is called products. So this is the word presentation. This is how you represent hydrogen gas reacting with oxygen. This is how you represent that using word equation. There's another way you can represent that. You can also represent that using symbol equation. So how do we represent using symbol equation? So symbol equation helps you to see how much each of substance is involved in a reaction. Let's say calcium carbonate decomposes by heat breakdown. So let's see what happens when calcium carbonate decomposes. Let's see how that, let's represent that equation by using symbol equation. So if you look at the reaction, the decomposition of calcium carbonate, you will see that this equation is balanced. It's balanced because the number of atoms on the reactant side is equal to the number of atoms on the product side. Therefore, this equation is balanced. This is important because atom cannot be created or destroyed in chemical reaction. This also means that the total mass of the reactant is equal to the total mass of the product formed. This is important, and this is known as law of conservation of matter. So that takes us to how to balance chemical equation. I'll show you how to balance chemical equation. So, in making equation balanced, what you need to consider, you need to look at the number of atoms on the left-hand side, that's the reactant side, and the number of atoms on the product side. You try and count how many atoms you've got on the reactant side and how many atoms you've got on the product side. So we can start by using hydrogen reacting with oxygen. We try and balance that equation and see how to balance the equation. So, this is chemical equation. This is how to write chemical equation. This is the symbol equation for hydrogen reacting with oxygen to give water. This equation is not balanced. It's not balanced because the number of oxygen on the reactant side is not equal to the number of oxygen on the product side. On the product side, you've got only one atom of oxygen, while on the reactant side, you've got two atoms of oxygen. You need to make the number of oxygen on the product side to be equal to the number of oxygen on the reactant side. You start, when you do that, but start adding. When we add 2 in front of water on the product side, you end up with 4 hydrogen atoms on the product side, or on the reactant side, you have 2 hydrogen on the reactant side. But you need to make the number of hydrogen on the reactant side to be equal to the number of hydrogen on the product side. So try one more thing. We add 2 in front of hydrogen, and that makes hydrogen on the left-hand side to become 4. We now have 4 atoms of hydrogen on the left-hand side, that's the reactant side, and on the product side, we now have hydrogen, 4 hydrogen atoms on the product side. Let's do more of balancing chemical equation. Let's see the reaction, balancing reaction between sulfuric acid reacting with sodium hydroxide. We can represent that equation by this is simple equation for sulfuric acid reacting with sodium hydroxide. If you look at this equation, it's not balanced because the number of hydrogen on the reactant side is not equal to the number of hydrogen on the product side. On the reactant side, you have got 3 hydrogen atoms, but on the product side, you have got only 2 hydrogen atoms. You need to make the number of hydrogen atoms on the product side to be equal to the number of hydrogen on the product side. So if we want to achieve that, we start by adding 2 in front of hydrogen. So if we put 2 in front of hydrogen here, we now have 4 hydrogen atoms on the product side, and on the reactant side, we now have 3 hydrogen atoms, but we need to make the hydrogen atoms on the left-hand side to be equal to a number of hydrogen on the product side. So how do we achieve that? We can try that. We add 2. If we add 2 in front of sodium hydroxide, that brings us to having 4 hydrogen in the reactants on the reactant side, 4 hydrogen on the product side. Then in terms of sodium, sodium is now balanced. We have 2 sodium on the product side, 2 sodium atoms on the reactant side. To make it clearer, so you see how to write the balanced equation. So this equation is balanced. This is balanced equation while reacting sulfuric acid and sodium hydroxide. This equation is balanced. I hope you've learned several ways of writing chemical equation. I hope you've learned how to balance chemical equation. See you next time.